Dr. Carrier, welcome to Profile. I understand you're 45?
Yeah, somewhere around there, like 44-ish. I gotta do the math.
45, and you are married?
Yes.
So you got married in 1995?
That's right, yeah.
Do you have kids?
We do not, no.
Your wife, Jennifer, right?
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit about her?
Yeah, really smart, funny girl. She's a theater arts major, loves theater, but she ended up becoming a really high-demand accountant. So she's like a really awesome business accountant now, and is the main breadwinner in our family. So she's very successful. I'm very proud of her, and we love spending time together.
Going to your childhood, were you raised very religious?
No, I was raised in a very liberal Methodist family, like very liberal, like practically not even religious. But we went to church and Sunday school and things like that, but it was never very, like, they didn't impose any kind of religious doctrines on us. It was more of just fun and education and stuff like that. And my family never expected me to have, like, confess any faith or anything, and expected me to be exploratory. So I did. And so my first religion was actually Taoism, which I had an experience that sort of convinced me that it was the one true religion, and then I went through the meditative practices and was a Taoist, a philosophical religious Taoist for a few years, and then but during that time I was also studying science and stuff, and started to realize as well that what was convincing me that Taoism was true is it has scientific explanations, and then at the same time I was noticing there were flaws in the Taoist philosophy. So I was kind of like falling out of interest in that religion, and then eventually, when I was still a Taoist, and a Christian came up to me and said, this is on a Navy base in 1990, came up to me and said, or somewhere around, no, it wasn't 1990 now, and now I realize it was 92. So anyway, so he came up and said, and tried to evangelize me, right, which we expect to happen on military bases all the time. And we got into a conversation. It's like, do you believe in God? And I says, well, I don't need to believe in God. I'm a Taoist, and so even God has to follow the Tao, and so on. And so they found that a very annoying interaction because they didn't have their script ready for that. But ultimately, they got to saying, well, have you read the Bible yet? And I says, well, I as a kid, I read bits of it. And I says, no, you can't make a decision until you've read the Bible. You really have to read the Bible. I says, well, all right. And they actually had a student Bible. I said, here, you can have my student Bible, and you can read this. I said, oh, well, thank you. I guess I'll read it then. And so after that, I sat down in the barracks and read the Bible cover to cover. It took me a few days, but Old Testament and New, the whole thing. And then when I finally turned the last page, I said, yep, I'm an atheist. From then on, I started looking for atheists, other atheist literature, and so on. But that was the extent of my involvement in religion.
Well, yes. As the old citation, I believe it was from Isaac Asimov. I think he was saying, properly read, the Bible is the most potent force for atheism. So I guess
yes.
That's yet another example of that.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's how I lost my faith as well.
Is reading the Bible.
Really, the whole
yes.
Bible.
Yes, you have to read the whole thing cover to cover. You can't read select parts. They guide you to read certain parts, but no, read it all.
Yes. You have to read between the lines too. I understand that you were in the Coast Guard at one point in a previous life or something.
Yes, very long time ago. In fact, I was in the Coast Guard so long ago that I have a National Service Medal for serving in Gulf War I. So that was quite a while ago, 1990. I didn't go to the Gulf, but I guarded an estuary in San Diego against Saddam Hussein's Phantom submarine with a billy club and a whistle. So that was my assignment from the Navy at the time, because I was on a Navy base getting my sonar training. But then I served on a large cutter, a 378-foot cutter in the Coast Guard. Did a year tour at sea, where we did anti-piracy patrols. We did drug interdiction, although there wasn't a lot of that in our patrol area. Mostly it was search and rescue and treaty enforcement. So we actually did things like catching drift netters and stuff like that in international waters. Yeah, so that was my backstory. I got marksmanship ribbons and pistol and rifle, so that's what started my interest in shooting. And so I learned a lot in the military. Even though I just did 2 years, I learned more in those 2 years than in my entire life prior to that. So it was quite an experience.
And then you switched your career completely.
Yes. And
became an historian.
Yeah. Well, there were some years of... I went back to school because I had signed in the Coast Guard for 4 years. But they eliminated sonar techs halfway through, and they said, well, you can either get out and go to college or you can retrain. And I said, well, I'll get out and go to college. And I thought at the time I'd be a math teacher because I loved math. But then when I started doing all the general requirements in college, and I realized I hated most math. I love math concepts, but I hate doing the rote mathematical tasks. And so I thought, well, I like language, so maybe I'll be an English teacher. And English requires you to study all of this literature, which I can't stand. So it's boring literature, the stuff that doesn't interest me. And so I said, no, I don't want to do this. But at the time, I was doing all the general ed requirements for transfer to a 4-year university. Berkeley is where I ended up. So I did all the Western civilization and other history courses, did American history, did African history, history of the Native Americans, and so on. And I fell in love with history because it's taught differently in college than it is in high school. In high school, it was just names and dates and memorization, and I hated history. And I could have told you I would never have been a historian. But when I got to college, it was all cause and effect. Why did these things happen in history? And how do we know? So it was methodology, like how do we know this happened, and so on. And then, of course, you could talk about much more of the salacious details of history in college. So it was way more interesting to me, and so I really fell in love with the concept of doing history and being a historian. And it was the Roman culture especially that attracted me, and I realized, I'd really love to study more about this Roman culture, ancient Rome, and so on. And it would be useful also, because at this time I was getting more involved in the atheist movement, it would be useful for studying the Bible and discussing these arguments and claims and so on. Because I'd have to get the languages, and so I figured I'd kill 2 birds with 1 stone and go into that, and I've loved it ever since, and that's went all the way to a PhD in it.
Where did you study history?
Well, UC Berkeley, I got my bachelor's degree in history and classical civilizations, and I studied California, Chinese, and Greco-Roman history there, and also did a lot of the languages in Greek and Latin. And from there, I got a fellowship to Columbia University, that's where I got all my remaining degrees, my Master of Arts, my Master of Philosophy, and then my PhD, all at Columbia University in New York, and so in the Ancient History department there. And
do you teach nowadays, or?
I don't have a teaching position. Since the market fell in 2008, it's almost impossible to get jobs in academics now. And I'm not entirely sure I want to, because I've seen the way that the politicking that goes on in academic departments is a real turn-off to me. But I've been enjoying doing what I'm doing now, which is just freelance writing, research, speaking. And also I double as a homemaker, so half of my life is I take care of all the domestic responsibilities. So Jen brings home the bacon, and I make sure she has nothing to do when she gets home. She doesn't have to do any cooking or cleaning or any of that. And so that's my life now. So I split it between those 2 duties, and I quite like it.
So you're a prolific author. I was looking at your bibliography, and you have quite a few books. I'd like to know about what's next in your book writing. I heard about a book that you may be working on the historicity of Jesus. Why we might have reason for doubt.
Yes, On the Historicity of Jesus is done, actually. All I have to do is finish the index for it. Right now it's in the publishing pipeline, so by June of 2014, it should be, according to the publisher, it should be out by then for everybody. Next in the line after that are books based on my dissertation, which is on ancient science. So I've got 1 book on science education in the early Roman Empire, which is about what the science content was of education in that time. And then I'm going to do The Scientist in the early Roman Empire, which is the whole sort of social history of scientists and science under the Roman Empire. What were the attitudes towards them? What role did they serve in society? What kinds of things did they achieve and do, and so on.
Now, I had a look at your resume, and it said you you know many languages, of course, languages for studying the Bible, but also, of course, English and French, German. You know ancient Greek. How about your Hebrew? How's your Hebrew?
No, I don't have Hebrew skills. No, I can peck my way through some aspects of Hebrew and Aramaic, as I used to do with Chinese. But no, I'm not by no means an expert in that field. And even in those other languages, I don't speak them. I can do written translation of them. But so my main expertise is Greek and Latin. Mm-hmm.
But you did study French and German, and that was, I guess, pretty handy for your book discussing Hitler's table talk.
Yeah, that's true. It's useful in many respects, because even in studying the historicity of Jesus, some of the most important scholarship has been published only in German or French. So I can read those articles. But yes, the Hitler story. Yeah, I did. That's an interesting story because it goes all the way back when Dan Barker, Freedom from Religion Foundation, knew that that I could translate German. Asked me. He was getting a lot of Christians throwing these quotes at him from Hitler, in which Hitler seems to say that he's an atheist and seems to be saying awful things about Christianity. So he says, "Are these authentic? Can you check this? And I'll pay you $50. You know, the Freedom from Religion Foundation will pay you $50 for checking it out." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And it just put me down a rabbit hole because I had no idea how interesting that was going to turn out to be, because I figured I would just go check the original German and check the English translation against it, the one printed English translation, and see if there's accuracies there or differences, and I would just report on it to him. But it turns out that the English translation is wildly different from the German. And so I was like, how could it be this different? This doesn't make any sense. So I had to start researching it, and I found out that the English, most of these passages that have Hitler talking about religion in, are actually translations of a French translation of the German original, and that French translation doctored the passages, changed what they said. So the English translation is unreliable, because it's not translating the original German. In many places it's translating the French. And the French is hugely unreliable because it's been doctored for some reason. So once I realized all this, I realized that no one had written a paper on this or had noticed this and mentioned it in Hitler studies. So I went ahead and did a full research report, compared all the different versions and all the different languages. Yeah, in fact, there's multiple German editions that don't agree entirely either. So that was a challenge as well. So I basically wrote all this up, had a friend help me to make sure that I got everything right, and then presented it under peer review for German Studies Review, and it got published. And now it's affected many aspects of Hitler studies, because now this paper's affected how historians look at and interact with this particular document, which is the Hitler's Table Talk, is the actual treatise we're talking about. And so that little $50 quick research thing that Dan Barker had me do, it led to all of that. And so that's something unusual that I'm known for, that you wouldn't normally expect, that I published in Hitler studies, even though I'm not a Hitler studies expert otherwise. That paper, by the way, I now just recently republished in my book, Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ. So people who want to actually go read that and see why these passages are not reliable, and why, in fact, when we look at the original German, we can confirm that Hitler definitely was a Christian, definitely a Christian believer. Of course, he was a Nazi Christian believer, so his Christian beliefs were Nazi beliefs, but it's just a weird sectarian take on Christianity, as there have been many throughout history.
So, to summarize for our viewers, you're, as a historian, you checked the originals, and Hitler was definitely not an atheist. This is like forgery.
Yeah, the passages that are used to sort of prove that he was an atheist or was anti-Christian, they're technically a forgery. I mean, I guess that's the way to put it, because when you look at the French translation, which is where these things usually originate from, they've doctored his words. So they've changed them in interesting and bizarre ways, which I show in the article in German Studies Review.
They keep coming back with this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Yeah.
And I point them to Mein Kampf. They just ignore it. Oh, no, I prefer to go with things that he said in confidence.
Yeah.
Hearsay, translated to, and then translated to.
Yes, right.
that, rather than what Hitler said directly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's true.
Your pastimes. What do you do just to pass the time?
Yeah, I think my favorite pastime of all is just hanging out with my wife. We'll hang out and watch TV and movies and make fun of it, for example, or talk about what we're watching and stuff. We'll sit and drink together and giggle together and stuff. That's probably my favorite pastime that I spend the most time doing, even. After that, gosh, what do I do with my time? I work. I'm kind of a workaholic, really, for all the things that I do. I'm not a go out and party kind of guy. I'll go to the occasional party if someone invites me to one, but we're neither of us are actually very outdoorsy. We're not outdoorsy types. We're not. We like to stay inside and be cozy in our house. But other than that,
what kind of movies?
Oh,
or
movies.
TV shows.
Well, gosh, lately we've been really impressed with Hannibal, the TV show. It's a horror television series. Artistically, it's magnificent. It's really high quality production. Definitely not for the faint of heart, though. So, very gory and eerie television series. That's one lately that we've really liked.
What's that? That show very, very popular on the fairy tale channel. I mean the History Channel, the Bible.
Oh, no, I don't watch. I haven't watched History Channel in years since I saw them do literally a serious documentary on how they're researching how Cain murdered Abel. What weapon did he use? It wasn't even a joke. They were seriously doing this whole hour-long documentary on the murder of Abel by Cain. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this channel.
How and when did you start blogging?
Gosh, I don't remember. I could check if I just jumped online and see when my first blog post was. I want to say 2007, maybe 2006. I'm thinking 2007, but I'm not positive. Yeah, way back when. So you asked when and
how did it start? What made you want to do the blog?
Well, it was an important way to sort of interact with my fans because by that time, I'd written stuff, I'd been speaking, and most of my writings throughout my life have been ways to save myself time. Like I'll keep getting asked the same question. And so I'll just write about it, and then when I keep getting asked that question, I can say, "Go read this," so I don't have to repeat myself repeatedly. And that's how most of my writings developed. And my blog started kind of the same way. So I wanted to have general answers to emails and things that were being sent to me that I could just publish for people to see. And so that's kind of how I got into blogging. It's kind of like answering questions or writing on topics like that, and also as ways to supplement my books to show certain aspects of things that I wanted to research further that weren't in my books. And then eventually, of course, just to announce my appearances and things like that. It just sort of developed organically in that way.
What do you think would it take for feminist atheists and other atheists to make peace and work together? Because it's very...
Yeah. Well, I think in reality, in just sort of the bare simple sense, that's already happening. Because there are people who have no problem with feminist atheists or atheists promoting feminism, but don't call themselves feminists. I think they actually are. I mean, if you look at the values they advocate and the things they do. But that's more of a semantic thing. People can label themselves however they want. The real problem comes from the anti-feminists, people who don't want atheists talking about feminism, people who are spreading anti-feminist views, and attacking women in the movement as well, in various ways, trying to chase them out of it, in a sense. And so that's the group that I think is creating the problems, really. And I don't think there is any way to work with them unless they're going to realize that what they're saying is harmful and wrong. Basically, if you're going to stand up and defend sexism and misogyny, then there's no way that you can work with people whose life values and humanism compels them to fight sexism and misogyny. They can't work together. So that's the reality right now. So ultimately, it's just a war over, is humanism and our humanist values going to be the mainstream values of atheism? Or are we going to get rid of moral values altogether and get rid of humanism from the atheism movement? And I think humanism is going to win, ultimately, in that conversation. Atheism is going to become a humanist movement. It already mostly is a humanist movement. The minority who are attacking humanist values are a really small minority. So that's the reality, and that's the way it's going to have to go, is that they're basically just going to have to leave or remain uninfluential until they get on board with supporting humanism.
Are you active on the Atheism Plus forum?
I'm not. No, in fact, I have no account there and have never posted there. Yeah. That forum was created by other people who wanted a particular safe space for particular groups to have particular conversations. So I respect that. Like, if they want to have their own particular conversations within their own guidelines and rules, that's the function of it. So to make it so that you don't have to worry about people trolling them and so on. So I support the idea of it, but I don't really monitor it, so I couldn't really tell you anything about how well it's being managed or moderated, for example. Yes, if you want to know more about me, about my work, my printed work, my online work, if you want to get me to speak or anything like that, all of that stuff's on my website at www.richardcarrier.info.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Mm-hmm.